Yes, the question in the live chat, can F incompetent into streaming? Well, I'm definitely quite incompetent this evening. I can't really figure out what's going on here, but hopefully you can all hear me now. I'm desperately hoping at this point because I'm just about to abandon this idea if all of this continues because I cannot figure this out whatsoever. I see that 3 of you are, in theory, hearing me. However, I need some confirmation. Yes, Iona, yes, I get some positive feedback. Yes, fantastic. F-Man is as good at stream as McLaren is at turning left. Yes, finally, it works. Absolutely brilliant to see that this is in fact working, and now we can get some in-the-can fake news content for you. There we go. Fantastic. Can we do this in full screen or whatever is about to happen with all this nonsense? There we go. Yes. Yes, you can hear my disgusting voice. Absolutely fantastic to hear that wonderful feedback here tonight. I see that there are 8 of you currently in the chat room. Thank you very much for spending part of your evening or morning or afternoon or whatever it is in your particular locale in this crazy world of ours. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us here. Yes, a bit quiet, but we can manage. That is about the max I can do with my volume levels, at least on this particular microphone here. I want the flexibility of the headset mic, so we'll deal with it. Pizza Face Racer asking, how have you been feeling lately in life? Well, that is quite the loaded question if ever there were one. Sim Racing 604, greetings from Canada. Audio is good. Sharpie Head, hello everyone. First of all, Sim Racing 604, greetings. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Of course, Mike from Sim Racing 604, as over 10,000 of you know by this point. Congratulations on breaking 10,000 subscribers, Mike. And here you've got some cool content in the form of a collaboration or partnership or something headed our way. I don't know any other details because I haven't talked to you about it. But whatever it is, it sounds really, really cool. And of course, best wishes in that endeavor. Jonah Hussein, welcome. You're alive. That's a running joke that I have with Jonah because he comes and goes in the comment sections of many a video, and he's absent for months on end, and whenever I see him, I say, hey, you're alive. Fantastic. Jack Thomas, 1:30 a.m. in the UK. Greetings, F-Man. Well, greetings to you, Mr. Jack Thomas. Yes, Andrew Anderson. Hello! I haven't seen your name in either a comment section or a live stream before, so welcome. If you are a new subscriber, I may just not have noticed you in the past, but welcome. Anyway, getting back to Pizza Face Racer's very pertinent and very loaded question. How have you been feeling lately in life? Well, it's been interesting, if I may say so. I'm sure many of you saw the fracas that was going on a couple of days ago, really, with the fake news copyright infringement claim that I had gotten from none other than Formula One management themselves. And, well, good news is they have ceased all of their claims, and obviously the video that I had put up is running now. So that's good. So hopefully the long-term health of F-Man is going to be secure for a while. Antonio Tavera, hello to Portugal. Thank you very much for joining us. Good evening to you, or very good early morning. Very early morning to you. But yes, Pizza Face Racer copyright strikes, they do suck, especially when they are 100% baseless. Obviously what happens on YouTube and pretty much any other streaming or video site is they have automated computer algorithms that scan content both visually and in terms of the audio to try and see if you've blatantly ripped off of something. And obviously everybody has a right to their intellectual property, and if you create something, it is obviously your prerogative to do what you will with it. But at the same time, you need better safeguards. to keep people from having their free speech squelched, we'll say. And be it a computer algorithm or whatever, I understand that the sheer volume of content that goes up on a site like YouTube every second is absolutely insurmountable for any live-action human being to sift through. I don't care how many eggheads you've got sitting on hundreds of thousands of computer terminals, but the way in which an allegation works or a strike works really needs to be overhauled, because at the moment it's a guilty until proven innocent policy, and if you are innocent, you can, in many cases, be taken offline completely for at least 30 days while the claimant decides to review or not. And if the claimant decides not to review your counterclaim, well, then you're guilty no matter what, even if you actually do have evidence to prove your innocence. So there's that fracas, but we got rid of that, so that's good. Andrew Anderson asking, how do you like the VRC Bentley? That is a fantastic car. That is an absolutely fantastic car. I really wish that we had more LMP1 cars in sim racing in general. Obviously, I'm mostly into Assetto Corsa, and obviously I'd really love to have more LMP1 cars in that sim. VRC are doing more of them. They are going to be completing a VRC prototype pack, and the Bentley there, as they're calling it, the Bradley Project 8 for licensing reasons. And it's the first of at least 3 that are going to be done. I know that they're going to be doing the Panos Esperante as probably the next car that we'll get in that pack, and I believe, I don't know this for sure, I haven't actually talked to anybody from VRC, but I think they're doing the Audi R8. I don't know that for sure, but I think that's going to be the third car. As far as any more, I don't know if they'll be doing them. I'd love to see the Toyota GT1. That would be brilliant. And I'd also love to see the Toyota IMSA car that had the V10. That thing would be fantastic. But the VRC Project 8 right now, it's brilliant. Yes, as for Pizza Face Racer and asking so many questions, what would I like to see from the 2021 F1 regulations? Well, honestly, I would like to see them basically take the rule book, burn it, and start all over again, because there is effectively nothing good that's coming from Formula One these days. The cars are ugly, they're not at all interesting to listen to, they're ridiculously fast, absolutely, but they can't follow each other. They can't really even overtake. I mean, look at every race in 2019. There's a reason why I really haven't been covering so much of what's going on in current Formula One, because there's really not much going on. It has become Formula Mercedes, and everybody else is in a separate championship at this point. There is truly no realistic opportunity for any other team to challenge for a race win, never mind challenging for the championship. So at this point, the real Constructors' champion is going to be whoever finishes second, because you do have a battle that is shaping up between Ferrari and Red Bull, for whatever that's worth, even though you never see it on television because they're always at least, several decades worth of seconds behind whoever's leading, be it Bottas or Hamilton. So Formula One, as far as I'm concerned, is no longer a world championship, because you only have one team that has truly gotten everything right, and everybody else is several seconds per lap slower on race pace. So to me, there's effectively no point in watching. As far as what I would like to see from the regulations, you need to open up the engine rules entirely, make the hybrid systems optional, allow any engine configuration you want. If you want to restrict it by displacement, go ahead, but allow any sort of engine, short of pulse jets and things like that, of course, any sort of piston engine or Wankel, whatever you want. Restrict it by displacement if you must, but allow the designers to find advantages. The rules are so prescriptive nowadays that any sort of thing that in previous years would have been seen as an innovation is immediately banned, because they say, well, no, it doesn't follow the regulations to the letter. So basically, you have the FIA dictating what they deem to be the prototypical Formula One car, and only something that fits that very narrow window is going to be allowed to compete. which means that anybody who comes up with an interesting idea, for example, if somebody were to make a Tyrrell P34 today, instantly it's banned. However, there could be avenues of development that could be discovered through somebody trying something a little bit radical. And I think those are things that always warrant exploration in any sort of discipline, be it motor racing or be it completely outside of sport in general. You need something else that's going to push the industry or push just generally the state of the art forward. I feel like Formula One is no longer progressing. Look at how radically different the cars were between 1970 and 1990. That's not possible anymore because anything that somebody comes up with is instantly banned or it's prohibited from the beginning. So you can't innovate. You can't come up with diversity in design, and which thereby means basically you cannot come up with diversity in results in the championship because there's always going to be somebody who gets it exactly right. And they get it so right in so many cases that nobody else is able to challenge. And that's another thing we see throughout history. Early 90s, Williams, they absolutely got those regulations right. And they didn't really have any competition. 1991, it was so forward-thinking that they had reliability issues, and that killed them. But 92, 93, and honestly 94 as well, yep, they were the team to beat. They were the team to beat all the way up to 97. Then McLaren got it right. Then Ferrari got it right, and then Red Bull got it right, and now Mercedes have got it right. So you have these multi-year stints, none of which, by the way, have been as long as the current stint of Mercedes dominating. They have been dominating since 2014. We're now in 2019. We're in Season 6 of utter Mercedes dominance, where nobody has a realistic shot of challenging for the Constructors' Championship. So, well, you know. Let's see. Question for you, Sim Racing 604. If you get the chance. Well, I'm getting the chance now, good sir. I know you're not the type to do clickbaity top 10 videos like that awful 604 guy, but what 3 or 4 open wheel mods cars are truly outstanding in your opinion? Well, you're looking at one of them right now, the RSS Formula 2000 V10. I love this era of the Formula One. I love this era of open-wheel design as well. The cars were complex for their day, but now, looking back on them 20 years later, they really do look very clean, very simple. They're very well proportioned. They're highly powered for a very low formula weight. This thing is 600 kilograms, and it's got 800 horsepower, so that's a very high power-to-weight ratio. So in terms of a mod, this thing is an absolutely faithful reproduction of the Ferrari F1 2000, and it is brilliant to drive. It's really difficult to understand initially, particularly if you're used to either the modern open wheelers, which are a lot heavier and have a lot more downforce, or especially tin tops, because these things are very twitchy and they require very sensitive inputs, and you must know what you're doing. So this still, I think, is the #1 open wheel mod right now. Coming up a close second has got to be the RSS 2019 car, Formula Hybrid 2019. Again, produced by the same people, produced immediately after this one, so this car was in the pipeline at the same time as Formula Hybrid 2019. Again, the workmanship is absolutely incredible, and some of the features off of the Formula 2000 are on Formula Hybrid 2019 as well, because they were sequential cars. They were contemporaneous projects for RSS. So it's really cool to see all of that. #3, it's got to be one of the VRC betas right now. And I really can't distinguish between them. The two that are still in beta right now are the Renault R25 and the McLaren MP420. They will be released in 1.0 spec soon. I don't know when, but they just went to 0.3 spec, so they're getting close. And just going 1.0 recently were the two 1997 cars, the Ferrari F310B and the Williams FW19. To me, there's really not much between all 4 of those. Again, they're all made by the same guys, and they're all fantastic. Crystal Racing, I just recently found your channel, and I really like what you're doing, and it's cool to see you here. Your question is, not a question, okay, but if the FIA continues to be so restrictive, they might as well make F1 a spec series. Very sad, but they want to introduce spec parts, gearbox, for 2021, so what else? It's still a little bit up in the air right now in terms of exactly what 2021 is going to look like. I believe we're going to be getting some more information within the next month or so because the FIA tends to make these announcements in terms of ratifying the regulations for either the next year or the next couple of years around July. So around the time of the Hungarian Grand Prix, we tend to get an announcement along these lines. I have heard rumblings about the Spec gearbox, which raises several questions. But I've also heard rumblings about Spec wings, Spec suspension, Spec brakes, Spec steering wheels, which would also mean Spec electronics. So there are many claims going on right now, and I'm sure most of them are spurious. But one thing that I have learned after many years of following motorsport is when there is a rumor, it tends to be grounded in fact someplace. The only thing that I've heard from many sources is a Spec gearbox. What they have now is effectively a Spec gearbox as it is. No, they are not absolutely identical in specification. The teams either design and manufacture the gearbox themselves or they buy it from a bespoke supplier who builds it to their specifications. But all the gearboxes in all the cars have 8 forward gears and 1 reverse, and they're all designed to interface with a 1.6 liter V6 engine. They've all got the semi-automatic paddle actuation. They all have a hydraulically actuated clutch. So what really is the variation? Okay, maybe you can start to really get into the details of specific materials that they use and what does that do to reliability, what does that do to efficiency, things like that. But they're all the same, and I guarantee you if you were to see every gearbox that's currently on the grid, you would be hard-pressed to distinguish them from one another. So, be that as it may, obviously the geometries and things in terms of where the clutch actually links up to the gearbox is going to be different depending on which engine you have, because the different engines have different crankshaft heights and the output shafts are going to be splined differently and all kinds of things like that. But if you want to introduce a Spec gearbox, that also means that you're going to have to introduce a Spec clutch. And if you introduce a Spec clutch, well, that Spec clutch, that single component which is locked in terms of its specification, is going to have to interface with different engines. I'm not an engineer, but I'm pretty sure when you're talking about something that's as highly refined and as detail-oriented as a Formula One powertrain, that's not quite going to work. So what is your solution? Do you have a bespoke clutch design for every engine manufacturer, and the teams are only allowed to use the clutch that's designed for their engine? Or do you go the more radical route and you say, well, we need to have Spec engines? Because if you got a crankshaft height of, let's say, for argument's sake, 100 millimeters, which is probably too high, on, let's say, the Ferrari's crankshaft is at 100 millimeters above the reference plane, but if you have the Honda crankshaft at 95 millimeters above the reference plane, that clutch isn't going to work. So do you standardize components for each engine, or do you just standardize the engines and therefore you have a standard powertrain? They might do that. I don't know if they'll do that, but they well could. As far as anything else, if you have a Spec gearbox, you're going to have a Spec suspension, aren't you? Because what does the suspension mount to? The gearbox. So there's that. If you want to have Spec brakes, what does the brake mount to? The wheels, really. The wheel hub, anyway, and the stub axle. So then you're going to have to standardize the stub axle to make sure you can accommodate the Spec brakes. And that stub axle is going to be mounted to the rear suspension and the front suspension. So if you want to standardize the brakes, ultimately you have to standardize the suspension. And if you're going to standardize the suspension, well, now you got to make sure that you don't have any other components of the car impinging on the working area of the suspension. So now that means you have to standardize the wings. So ultimately, it sounds like they want to make a Spec series. Autopolis, hello! Thank you very much for being here. And is the season still going to be boring? Yes, absolutely. It is going to be incredibly boring. It is already incredibly boring. You only have one team winning races out of 5 rounds so far. It's already a lost cause. Dunkley, hello. What is your favorite Formula One car? It's a hard question to answer because there are so many iconic cars, but the one that I always come back to is the McLaren MP420. And I know it's sacrilege to call myself Ferrari man and to say my favorite car is a McLaren, but there it is. Scuderia Casey Dixon. Hello! Yes, you do have to show up to this stream. And I saw a question up here in the chat about, yes, Christian Gaitan. Hello! You've probably seen me on Twitter. What's your thoughts on Fernando Alonso and McLaren's horrendous day at Indy? It's a horrendous day at Indy. In fact, it's been an absolutely horrendous week at Indy for McLaren. He had a crash a couple days ago, wrecked the prime car, and ultimately went to the spare car. But it took them an entire day to make the decision to go to the spare car. Again, I am not a race team manager. However, if I know that I'm going to be trying to qualify for the Indy 500 and I can bring two cars with me, I'm going to make sure that both of those cars are set up identically and that both of them are absolutely ready to go at all times. Because if you have a crash in the race car, the spare is going to be there and you can use it. So I don't understand why McLaren chose to forfeit a day and a half of track time trying to rebuild the race car. Apparently there was too much damage, so they really needed to rebuild the race car basically from the ground up. So it's absolute ineptitude on the part of Zach Brown. I know that he is not the one who is physically making every single decision about how the cars are running, but he is the figurehead and he is the CEO. Therefore, he is responsible for it. And we now see Fernando Alonso probably going to be bumped out of the Indy 500. If you watched McLaren's social media feeds over the last few months, you saw them do the whole 9-degree training program on Instagram and Facebook and whatever. You saw them do all of these touchy-feely, feel-good interviews with Zach Brown and Fernando Alonso. Why were they spending all of their time on social media rather than building the car and testing the car? Yeah, they had that private test at Texas Motor Speedway, but I couldn't think of any place less representative of Indianapolis than Texas Motor Speedway. You've got an entirely different type of circuit. Texas is banked everywhere. Even the start-finish straight is a corner. It's not straight at all. And the banking through the corners is really severe, and the car is experiencing different loads all around the lap. It just doesn't represent Indy at all. With all of the money and all of the resources that McLaren have, do you think it's that much of a stretch that they could have, I don't know, rented out Pocono for a couple of days? I mean, yeah, it's a triangle. It's not an oval per se, but then again, Indianapolis is a rectangle, and at least one of the corners at Pocono is actually a copy of what the corners are at Indianapolis. So, if you're Zach Brown, and assuming you have a full mental capacity, which is in doubt very much at this point, do you spend your time on social media, or do you make some phone calls and you rent a place like Pocono for a few days and you test your race car? I don't know. Crazy theory, I'm well aware, but Zach Brown dropped the ball on this, and we're not going to see Fernando Alonso in the Indy 500 because of it. What else do we have here? Yep. And Mr. Casey Dixon, yes, it is McLaren. I have to agree with you. And in hindsight, let me just say that Lewis Hamilton had incredible foresight to be able to predict how far McLaren were going to fall. When he left the team in 2012, everybody said he was crazy. And yeah, I just got off the bat of complaining about how Mercedes have entirely wrecked competition in Formula 1, but Lewis Hamilton, he definitely knew something was going on a while before it happened, and he made that decision, and it won him another 4 world championships. So that was an inspired call, very shrewd on his part. Yeah, Sim Racing 604, qualifying for IndyCar, it happens over the space of a couple of days. Today was day one of qualifying, and everybody is allowed to run as many times as they physically can, as much as they have time to do. They were running literally all day at Indianapolis, and a lot of teams made 5, 6, 7 runs at it. They do qualifying on average speed in IndyCar. It's not necessarily lap time, although the higher average speed is going to give you a faster lap time. So it's a 4 lap average speed, and they give you the grid based off of that in descending order. Fernando did not make it into the top 33. Well, he did, barely, and you've got to be in the top 33 to ensure that you're going to start the race, because the Indy 500, it's a little bit different from the rest of the races in IndyCar because they have more entrants than they have grid slots. You've got 33 grid slots, so you have to make the race. So effectively, you had pre-qualifying today and tomorrow, and then from there the grid will be set. So you do not have any guaranteed spots whatsoever. Chuck does hop laps. Yes, indeed. Hamilton totally knew about Mercedes developing their engines before everybody else. Um, Mercedes, again, I've heard this from a couple of sources. I've never confirmed it, but I tend to believe it. Mercedes supposedly had a single cylinder test engine running on the dyno in Stuttgart in 2010. So this was 4 years before the turbo hybrid Rex came about, and Mercedes were already working on the engine. So there you go. Obviously, the connection is quite clear. McLaren were they were basically a Mercedes factory team for a long time, including the time Lewis Hamilton joined them. So they had the Mercedes engines, they had the Mercedes technical support, they had Mercedes design support as well, and obviously Hamilton made a visit to Stuttgart and saw this engine on the dyno and said, hey, if Formula One goes in this direction, I want to be driving that. McLaren loses their Mercedes engine deal at the end of 2013. 2014 really is the last time, but McLaren were in the toilet before that. But he knew that Mercedes engines were going to be strong. They had more development time than anybody else. And yeah, when they became a factory outfit, it must have grabbed his attention, and certainly it's paid off. Pizza Face Racer asking, which series do you think has the best racing nowadays? IndyCar. Thank you very much. Zach Minotti, hello. The In Memory of a Legend 2000 that you saw on the seat here in this video, this is the RSS Formula 2000, and down there, I'm trying to find it. There we go. In the Memory of a Legend, you can see just down there on the seat, that is a reference to Michael Schumacher. This car is based on the Ferrari F1 2000, and this was the first Ferrari with which Michael Schumacher won a world championship. So they did that thinking of Michael Schumacher. Yes, IMSA also has very cool racing. They've got fantastic racing, which is really odd to think about it because most of their events are endurance events. And typically you wouldn't see complete balls out racing in an endurance race, but you see it, and quite often it goes down to literally the final lap after 2 hours or 5 hours or 24 hours in some cases. So it's an incredible thing. And it's even more incredible because that is a proper series where the teams are either constructors or they have bought bespoke cars from constructors. So the cars are different from each other. They are not all spec cars. They're built to different specifications within a set of regulations, quite like Formula One used to be. So that is always remarkable to see such close racing in a series like that. And it's true. Dunkley, who is your favorite Formula One driver? Well, it's so hard to answer a question like that because it's so hard to judge drivers across eras. I was just responding to a comment on a video of mine, somebody basically asking the same question of, how would you compare a Prost versus a Hamilton, for example, or a Fangio versus a Senna? It's impossible because the cars change out of necessity as technology advances, and the drivers thereby have to change the way in which they do their job because the cars are different, and you physically can't do certain things with them in the past that you can do with them now, and vice versa. So it's so hard to judge. And raw performance and the statistics, they really do not tell the whole story. Look at somebody like Jean Alesi, for example. He has one Grand Prix victory to his credit, but if anybody were to come out with a straight face and say that Jean Alesi was not a good driver, you have completely missed the party. So the statistics don't necessarily have a bearing on who is the best or even who is your favorite. I'd say going back through history, one of the drivers that I really admire is Gerhard Berger. Because he stayed on through the turbo era, he stayed on through the V10 era, so very different cars. He managed to win quite a few races. He drove twice for Ferrari. He drove for McLaren, teammate to Senna. He finished his career with Benetton and actually won the German Grand Prix in 1997 after he had already announced his retirement. So somebody like him who just has the tenacity more, I would say Berger had more tenacity than he had outright performance on most occasions. But even though he was being compared to Senna all the time, being his teammate when Senna was winning championships, he held his own, and he's a really shrewd guy. He's a smart guy. He always makes interesting comments, and he's had a little stint as at least a partial team owner as well. So he's played the game in all different sorts of roles, and he's still relevant. So I quite like Gerhard Berger. Scuderia Casey Dixon asking, why does this car, the Formula 2000 V10 by RSS, why does it sound more like the Ferrari F2001? Honestly, there's really not much of an appreciable difference between the engines in both of those cars. First of all, they were both Ferraris. Second of all, they competed in sequential years, so they're basically contemporaries of each other. When the F1 2000 was racing, the F2001 was being tested at Fiorano. So they were built at the same time. They were effectively identical in specification, especially in terms of the powertrain. So they're going to sound very similar first and foremost. Secondly, the way that these cars sound, the way that any car sounds, is so greatly dependent on so many factors. When we're talking about how television coverage works of motorsport, the TV companies have to put a camera somewhere on the car, and there are precious few locations where they can actually do it. So they end up putting a camera on the roll hoop, or sometimes they're putting a camera on the side of the intake snorkel, and wherever they're putting the microphones, if they're even running separate microphones, is going to be basically anywhere where they're not going to disturb any of the car's components. So you can have, for example, you can even see this in Corsa Clienti videos by Bozzi and Italian supercar videos when Ferrari does Corse Clienti events in Europe, and they're running some of the old Formula One cars. If somebody's running a GoPro on the F2004, for example, it doesn't at all sound the way that it did in the TV coverage in 2004. And that's all strictly down to the camera. Yeah, nowadays when Ferrari run these events, they're not running the engines to absolute full power, but they're the same engines, so they're going to sound the same more or less. So it's basically where the microphone is, where the camera is, what the wind is doing. So as the air's rushing over the car, is the microphone shielded from the wind? You know, where is it even mounted on the car? Because if it's mounted to something that's hard into the chassis like the roll hoop, it's going to pick up the vibrations of the engine more than the audible sound of the engine. That's why cars like the McLaren MP420, for example, if you remember from the TV coverage, had a very low-pitched drone in the onboards, but when you heard it from outside, it sounded like every other Formula One engine for the most part. And it's got to do with harmonics. It's got to do with vibrations and the way that they transmit through structures and things like that. It's all very complicated, but basically, it's where you put the camera and or microphone. Favorite sounding car? Dear. I'm not sure I could really answer that question because there are cars are so diverse. Cars are almost like people in a way because you're never going to find two cars, even if they're identical to each other. They're the same make and model, and they were built at the same time. There are still differences between two individual cars. So just like there are still differences between identical twins, so it's impossible to say which one is your favorite. I like honestly, I like American muscle cars sometimes. There is something about a really gurgly, high displacement, low revving V8 that is cool to listen to sometimes. At the same time, you gotta love the operatic Formula One V10s and V12s. Uh, they're all snowflakes, honestly, and they all have their own individual attributes, which are quite pleasing. 8802 Gator, best sounding F1 car is anything running a Kazi DFE. That's the Cosworth DFE that was so successful in the 60s and 70s. Or the McLaren MP46. The McLaren MP46, specifically the Honda RA121E. That is a very cool engine. Indeed. Sim Racing 604 asking a very interesting question. I like this one. Are there any cars you want to drive? Obviously, driving an F1 car isn't feasible, but do you have aspirations to drive a GT car or a supercar, another run with the Formula 2000? He's talking about a Formula 2000 race car, not this RSS Formula 2000 V10 here. I am actually going to do another run in the Formula 2000 later on this year in September. So I'm going to be doing that again. So that's going to be great fun. It was great fun last time, and hopefully now that I've done it before and I actually was able to learn a lot in a short time, hopefully it'll be even more enjoyable now because now I know what to expect and I know how to operate the car and what it can do, what it can't do, that sort of thing. Also, what I need to do to be more physically able to do it. So that's going to be fun. But aside from that, there are plenty of cars that I would love the opportunity to have a go in, and most of them, honestly, are road cars. I would love someday to drive a Ferrari, any Ferrari, really. If I could pick, I would love to have a go in something like the F40, which would probably be untenable. But the 355, that would be fun. Certainly, I'm not really interested to drive any flappy paddle Ferraris. Anything with a proper stick and clutch, I'd be all over it. But aside from that, there are plenty of just normal everyday road cars that I'm quite interested in and never got the chance to drive. I've never driven a Mazda Miata. and I would love to get the chance to drive a Mazda Miata, and I've just never gotten the opportunity to do it, even though there are Mazda dealerships all over the place, and I could just go in and test drive one any day of the week. But honestly, I'd love to drive a Miata. They just look like so much fun. They're really small. They're really light. They don't have a lot of power, but they don't need it because they're so light. I think a little Miata would be fun. I would even consider buying one. Pizza Face Racer. Yes, I did drive a Formula 2000 car. There's a video someplace on the channel, in the sea of 2,800 videos, literally, that I've got up here. It was my 3,000 subscriber special. So if you type in Ferrari Man 601 3,000 subscriber special, blah blah blah, you should find it, and it's there. It's like an hour long, and it's commentated throughout, and just go through what the experience was like. And there's onboard footage, and you get to see what it was. I was running at Pocono, the North Circuit there, and yeah, it was fun. I was in a group of about 15 other cars, so there was traffic, unfortunately, and we were only allowed to overtake on the banking, which sucked because I got stuck behind everybody. Because honestly, I'm not trying to be a moron here. I was faster than anybody else on the day, so I was getting stuck in traffic. So that spoiled it a little bit, but it was fun nonetheless. And I have to say, if you've never driven a race car, I don't care what it is, you have no idea what it's really like. Now we can approximate the driving with sim racing, and I was amazed at just how much I already kind of knew from sim racing. But at the same time, you can't replicate the physical sensations, and that's a big deal. When I got out of the car, even though I didn't go faster than like 140 miles an hour, and I wasn't in any corner going faster than maybe 60, and that maybe is a little bit too fast of an estimation. Um, you're beat up. Literally every single thing on your body hurts for days, and it's a good kind of pain because you feel like you've done something, but at the same time, it hurts a lot. And if you were going to do that competitively, you would really need to up your exercise routine to be able to deal with that on a routine basis. Chuck does hop laps. Yes, you are absolutely correct. He says, once you hop in a real car and get the ass feel, I love that term, it's incredible how your arms seem to correct slides all by themselves, no brain involved. Yep, that's exactly right. Whenever you listen to an on-track piece by Martin Brundle, he always talks about the gyros in your body, and that's exactly what happens. Even on the street, I drive a little Toyota Tacoma, and it's a pickup truck, so no, it's not glamorous, no, it's not fast, but it's a 5-speed manual, and you can have some fun in it. You can break traction and all that kind of stuff. And when you do break traction, you really break traction, and the back end comes around and it wants to drift on you, and you just correct. You just do what you need to do, and you're not thinking about it, and before you even know it, you've corrected it and you're back in a straight line. So yeah, that's the way it works. Your body is so aware of its relative position in space that you don't even, you're not aware of it most of the time because it is just automatic. But when you're in a car and things start to get out of shape, you've corrected it before your brain even acknowledges that it's going wrong. Desert Racer 75. Greetings, F-Man. Are there any other Indy or Champ cars you'd like to see in Assetto Corsa? I would love to have an Assetto Corsa version of Kart Factor, the R Factor 1 mod that replicated the 1998 Champ car season, I believe it was. We need that. We need the Reynard, we need the Swift, we need the Penske, we need all of it. That would be good. And I would love if VRC would do it because they've already done the Reynard 99i, from the 1999 season. So how difficult could it be to make a Swift, for example? Do it. Scuderia Casey Dixon, you've done quite a bit of effort there in putting that comment together, so I will read it off. Your personal top 10 favorite Formula One cars are the Lotus 49, the Jordan 191, the McLaren MP46, the McLaren MP420, the Ferrari F2002, the Ferrari 412 T2, the Ferrari 312 T4, Red Bull RB7, Ferrari F2004, and the Ferrari F2003. There you go. Antonio Tavera, you would ask this question being Portuguese. What do you think of the Portimao circuit? It's cool. It's you know, it's a Tilkodrome. It's okay. I don't think uh, I don't think it would give. I don't think it would be a bad venue for a Grand Prix, but I don't think it would be any different from, say, Catalunya, because it's the same sort of deal. You've got long straights and tight corners and a lot of runoff. So you would get a very similar race, I would think. I think Portugal should have a Grand Prix. They have a history of having a Grand Prix. We haven't had too many Portuguese drivers, unfortunately, but I don't think you would get any better or any worse racing at a place like Portimao. Here's a question. Scuderia Casey Dixon asking, what do you think is the worst Formula One circuit? To me, the horrid one in India. I actually liked the circuit in India. I thought it was cool. It reminded me of Kyalami. It was fun. Sector 2 was stupid, but the rest of it was cool, particularly the run up into turn 2. I think it was going up the hill real steeply, kind of like turn 2, or Jean Todt calls it turn 3 in Austria, really steep, tight right-hander. That was cool. I liked the long back straight, again, very reminiscent of Austria, but it was all right. I think the problem really was the fact that it was in India, because they just didn't have the wherewithal financially and logistically to keep the race there, because they only held it 3 times. All 3 events were won by Sebastian Vettel, so I mean it was just the era. But I liked it, and I was sad to see it go. Quite honestly, the worst circuit for me, you know what? It's a toss-up between Singapore and Baku. Both of those tracks are utter garbage in my opinion. Now, before you all crucify me, Baku has given us decent racing, and I'm not afraid to say that, and I won't be remiss in failing to mention that they've given us decent racing. But the reason why Baku has given us decent racing is because it causes accidents, and in the climate of the FIA being hell bent on killing all things fun in the name of safety, why, pray tell, would you have a race in which the circuit passes by a literal 13th century castle which is made of solid stone? And it's unprotected effectively. I don't get it. Furthermore, you have, I think it's the longest straight in the championship. The cars are reaching 330 clicks. It's in the DRS zone. If they have a draft, maybe they're getting up to 340 or so. It's ridiculously fast. And if somebody were to get airborne down that straight, rubber to rubber contact or whatever, the first thing that they hit is either the pit lane, which is packed with people, the grandstand, which is packed with people, or they land on top of a concrete barrier, which is not designed to be landed on. So, the safety aspect, the FIA, they're hypocrites as usual. Yes, the, what was that called? The Yungam? International Circuit in South Korea. Yeah, that was pretty hard as well. Again, it was a tilkodrome. You have a long straight, and then you have corners that are taken no faster than 100 clicks. What's the point? And then they moan about a lack of overtaking. Well, what happens when you have a car that's 8 meters long and you have to get it around a corner that's not 8 meters wide? You all go single file. It's pretty simple. Yeah, Sochi has one good corner. It's turn two, or is it turn three technically? Whatever it is, it's the long left-hander that goes through like 190 degrees or so. That's the good corner. The rest of it is all stop-start, carbon copy of itself, annoying, boring, whatever. Yes, Korean Grand Prix qualifying in 2010 with the F duct, and then 2011 with the unrestricted DRS use in qualifying. That was fun because you saw the drivers doing something a little bit risky. Yeah, you knew that the consequences of failure were going to be reasonable, which I think is what you want. They're not going to die. But yeah, running with the F duct activated the whole way, or with DRS opened up the whole way, that's cool. That's daring. That is the sort of calculated risk that I think really adds to the show, and that's basically what's been lost now. On the topic, though, of calculated risks, this brings me to something that I've wanted to talk about. I was going to do a standalone video about this, but decided against it because I really just couldn't get things cogently put together. But Zandvoort, they want to revive the Dutch Grand Prix, and they want to bring it back to Zandvoort. Now, there's nothing wrong with Zandvoort. It's the historical home of the Dutch Grand Prix, and it's a cool circuit. It was, I believe, it was built in 1947 or something like that. So it's one of the oldest permanent racing facilities on the planet, really. That hasn't really changed very much either. But there, again, on that point about Baku, about them just sort of taking all of their safety considerations and throwing them out the window, that's exactly what they're doing with Zandvoort as well. If you look at how that circuit's designed, it's just cut into the hillside. It's the road is just draped on top of pretty steep hills, and it's just the topography of the area. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like natural topography circuits. But if you look at what they have released in terms of the circuit configuration for the Dutch Grand Prix, you quickly realize that they are really making a deal with the devil here in terms of safety. And I hate the idea of having 800 acres of runoff at the outside of every corner and things like that. But there comes a point where you do things to excess, and then there comes a point where you really didn't do enough. And that would be the case with Zandvoort, in my opinion. Turn 8 at Zandvoort, the really fast right-hander, it's cambered slightly downhill, and then it goes uphill again over a crest. It's taken, at least in Assetto Corsa in the 2019 RSS car, it's taken at 280 kilometers an hour. And it's also the fastest corner on the circuit. You've also got camber in there, it's banked. You've got elevation change going on. You have incredible vertical loads going through the car there. If somebody loses a front wing and they don't know it, or if somebody bottoms through there and they stall the floor and they lose downforce that way, they're going to take off through that corner. And when they take off through that corner, the first thing they're going to hit is not a tire barrier or a Tech Pro barrier or tons of tarmac runoff. The first thing they hit is going to be either an unprotected natural hillside or a crowd. So, again, I don't think the FIA are really thinking this through. And Charlie, peace be upon him, is not somebody who would have signed off on bringing the Dutch Grand Prix to Zandvoort as it is. I don't think Zandvoort should be changed. It's a fantastic circuit, but nowadays it's just not suitable for Formula One. The changes that they've talked about to Zandvoort is basically they want to extend the exit a little bit of the last corner in Sector 1, the slow left-hander. They want to extend the exit a little bit just to give the cars a little bit of a straighter path into that very tight left-hander. And beside that, they want to change what is now that sort of loop section. You come down the infield straight, and then it's a hard braking zone, and then it's a very tight right-hander into that long, slightly cambered left-hander that leads you down toward the end of the lap. They want to extend that complex a little bit. I think they want to bypass most of the long right-hander and just sort of straighten out that run and allow the cars to go even faster into the final two corners, which they also want to modify a little bit by adding a little bit of banking. So they want positive camber in those corners so that they can take them flat with DRS. Now, that all sounds very good on paper, and I'm sure it will allow some overtaking to happen down the start-finish straight, particularly if that's where they want to put the DRS zone. But, again, the problem with that is, where is a car going to go if it's out of control at high speed? There's nowhere for it to go other than to fall back down the side of the banking and back into the racing line at best case, or at worst case, if it gets launched, it's going to continue to fly on a tangent line into the crowd. So, again, I do not think they have really considered this. As to why we can't go back to Istanbul, I don't know. It is the biggest travesty in the last 20 years, in my opinion, because they built this place specifically for Formula One. They hosted the race 6 times, and nobody has used it since. It's a real shame. It was a fantastic circuit. Of course, everybody remembers Turn 8 at Istanbul, the four apices through that corner. It was brilliant. Even the 2005 cars, with all of that grip, they still weren't taking it flat in qualifying, and I think they finally were able to take it flat in 2010 or 2011 when they had the last Turkish Grand Prix. It was brilliant. Absolutely the best circuit added to the calendar in the last 2 decades, at least. And they abandoned it. I don't know. I know ticket sales for the race itself were dismal, but it was brilliant to watch on television. Yes, the 2010 Turkish Grand Prix, which everybody remembers for no reason other than the two Red Bulls taking each other out. It was Sebastian Vettel's fault, for the record. And yes, that's the only thing about the race that I actually remember. I don't remember who actually won it. I want to say that Jenson Button won that race, or was it Hamilton? It certainly wasn't a Ferrari driver. I know that much. Malaysia, the Sepang circuit, I never liked it, honestly. I thought that it was all a bit gimmicky with those corners that are constantly changing their radius, so you can't really set the car up through them. I don't know. It didn't produce good racing. The only time that it did produce good racing was when it rained, which happened somewhat frequently. So that was a godsend. But honestly, I didn't like it. I remember watching in 2006, 2007, and waking up at 1 o'clock in the morning to watch the Malaysian Grand Prix, and it turned into a procession pretty fast. It wasn't worth it to me. Ah, yes, the wonderful stories of all of those wonderful upstart brand new teams for the 2010 Formula One World Championship, and basically all of them that no longer exist. None of them still exist, do they? We had Virgin, Caterham, Hispania, and we were supposed to have USF1 as well. Can we all laugh at USF1 for a solid minute? Basically, the Hispania cars were basically the modern day MasterCard Lola, except they actually competed for a couple of seasons. They competed for 3 seasons: 2010, 2011, and 2012. Their car was built entirely by Dallara. They had a customer Cosworth engine. I don't know, a decent concept, and I think things like that need to exist to allow more teams to take part in the race. But you know, they did an absolutely terrible job. They didn't have terrible drivers. They had Karun Chandok, who honestly was no slouch. He just never had a proper chance. Narain Karthikeyan was in there, who was a slouch. But Daniel Ricciardo is in Formula One today because of Hispania, later known as HRT. So, they had their place, and it's a shame that we don't have more teams. But we don't have more teams today because it's just so damn cost prohibitive to run a Formula One team. Marussia was only promising because they had tons and tons of cash from their financial backers, but ultimately what killed um, that outfit was what happened at Suzuka 2014. And, you don't wish for that to happen to anybody, be it a driver, a team, whatever. But it's what happened to Marussia. They stuck on through 2016, and that was it. But, you know. Can anyone name 3 Caterham drivers? Yes, as a matter of fact, I can. Jarno Trulli, Vitaly Petrov. Um, no, it wasn't Nakajima. Or was it Nakajima? It might have been Nakajima. For some reason, my brain is associating Caterham with a Japanese guy, and it must have been Nakajima. But perhaps it wasn't. I don't know. I don't remember anymore. Kobayashi! Yes, it was Kobayashi. How could I forget Kobayashi? He was brilliant when he came on board in 2009 driving for Toyota. The guy was an absolute nut job. Remember Brazil, 2009. And he had that storming drive up through the field. Everybody remembers Jenson Button, and they say, oh, what a great drive it was from Jenson Button. Jenson Button didn't deserve his world championship, I'm sorry. He got lucky having a car that was basically cobbled together from spare Honda parts, and it was better than everybody else for the first half of the year. And then he didn't win another race again. So it was damage limitation for him the whole way. But Kobayashi, he was a find. Indeed he was. And he didn't get anything that he deserved. He was in the Ferrari Academy for a while, and I think that stopped after he crashed the F60 in Moscow on a demonstration run, actually. But he was somebody who surely deserved more. Did Fisichella ever race for Caterham? No, he didn't. I don't think he did. He drove for Renault, and then he was drafted in by Ferrari for the end of 2009, and we didn't see him again, did we? Wait, did Fisichella have a drive after 2009? I can't recall now. I don't think he did. Wait, Force India. Did he race for Force India in 2010? Yeah, I can't remember Fisichella being in there after 2009. But yeah, he had his little honeymoon with Ferrari, replacing Felipe Massa. He was actually paired up with Luca Badoer. In there, they had Luca Badoer in the second Ferrari, partnering Kimi Raikkonen after Felipe Massa had his accident in qualifying for Hungary, and Badoer hadn't been in a competitive drive since 1999 or 2000, some ridiculous time ago, and he performed as you would have expected him to perform. He was dead last all the time, and it was basically Ferrari's way of saying thank you very much for your tireless work developing all of these championship-winning cars. We're going to put you in the biggest truck that we have built in the last 10 years and expect the world of you. And of course, it didn't work out very well for Mr. Badoer, and then I don't know what happened to him after that. I think he retired from racing altogether with his pride entirely destroyed. Race Ready F1. I accidentally got syrup on my phone screen. Well, can we get F's in chat for Race Ready F1's phone screen? Hooray! I can into meme. Fantastic. That's the only time you're going to see me do anything with memes anywhere on this channel. And yes, hesitated I. FUD. For those of you who don't know, FUD is generic British, Scots, Irish for an undesirable person. That was not very nice, Mr. Hesitated I, sir. Hesitated I will have you know that I have heard Americans say FUD as well. So check yourself. And also, Zach Brown. Zach Brown is not a FUD. Zach Brown is, well, first of all, now let's just cut to the chase. Zach Brown is an asshole. Yes, he is. And he is completely inept. He can't run McLaren worth a shit. He is more concerned with appeasing Bahraini billionaires than he is with building race cars. And it shows. Look at what McLaren hasn't done in the last 20 years. Win the Formula One Constructors' Championship. Who was the last guy to do that? Ron Dennis. Who did they fire? Ron Dennis. What has McLaren done without Ron Dennis? Finished last. Yes, and I know that they're not really finishing last. That honor goes to Williams. F in chat for Williams, please. But, McLaren, you are the second most successful team in Formula One history, or at least you were. Maybe Mercedes is catching up with you now. But, honestly, what have you forgotten? Apparently everything. The worst F1 driver in recent memory. Uh, well, how recent are we talking here? Because, let's see, my personal memory goes back to 2005-ish, and then going on through the annals of history, there have been some real cream puffs in the F1 field, particularly in the years of old. They've all seemed to have gotten a whole lot more consistent in more recent times, simply because of how the feeder series have been organized lately. But the worst driver in recent memory. Who's the worst driver that I've personally watched was Yuji Ide. I remember in qualifying for the Australian Grand Prix in 2006, he brought out a red flag in Q1 because he couldn't figure out how to get the car into reverse. So there was that. Then he had a big accident at Imola with Christian Albers, sent Albers tumbling through the gravel. And that incident is probably actually what ended the San Marino Grand Prix because, safety. And, and he was sacked after that. Will Stevens? I don't know if Will Stevens was as bad as E-Day. He didn't do as many races as E-Day either, and he only did 4. Worst driver in the last 10 years? Who would I really bestow that honor upon? Would it be... Dear, I don't like to say bad things about people unless they're Zach Brown, but I mean, in terms of careers that should have yielded more in Formula One, I immediately think about Sebastian Bourdais, Toro Rosso, 2007, 2008. He stalled on the grid quite famously at Monza. Meanwhile, Sebastian Vettel went on to win the race in the same car. More recently. Thinking of, Will Stevens has to be up there. Thinking of Alexander Rossi for Marussia in 2015, I think it was. And then, obviously he's been very successful in IndyCar now. But he wasn't so great in Formula One. Julian Palmer, he was pretty horrific. I see Julian Palmer being suggested there. Taki Inoue being beaten by the medical car some years ago in Hungary. That was fun. Scuderia Casey Dixon. Bourdais was a beast in Champ Car. What happened to him in Formula One? The Red Bull driver program happened to Sebastian Bourdais. End of sentence. Jean-Denis Deletras, yes, he certainly was not bad, in terms of being bad. Actually, let's, I was going to do it just on my iPad here, but let's do it for the cultural learnings of Make Benefit Glorious Nation of F-Man. Let us do a little bit of a search here. Jean-Denis Deletras, yes, here he is. Here's his Wikipedia page. 3 F1 races. His first race was Australia 94. Yep. I mean, three entries over 2 years. I don't think you can really judge somebody from 3 races. I mean, yeah, you can. Here's his Formula 3000 results. They're not good. They're really not good. Looks like in 1988 he ran for 2 teams, scored 2 podiums, and then a retirement. Didn't qualify for the majority of the races. Retirements. First racing. This is the team that became Life, actually. Yeah. His highest finish in Formula 3000 was 3rd. World Sports Car Championship in 1988. Looks like he did 1 race at Brands Hatch. Formula 1. Retire 15th at the European Grand Prix. And then 24 Hours of Le Mans. He's a Le Mans winner. How about that? 01 and 02. FIA GT. Yeah, did A lot better in GT. 2002 was a very cool year for him. World Endurance Championship, yeah, 70th. 70th. That's fantastic. Yeah, winning Le Mans, that definitely brings somebody up a bit. Scott Speed. Ah, dear. Scott Speed, the only Formula One driver to be banned from iRacing. What do we have for Mr. Speed? Yeah. There's Scott Speed. He's still in Rallycross. He's won the championship in Rallycross 3 times, apparently. 9 top 10 finishes and a pole position in the second tier of NASCAR. 1 win, 9 top 10s, and 1 pole in the NASCAR Truck Series. Formula One. Here's where I will say that Scott Speed got himself shortchanged. Toro Rosso dropped him after the 07 European Grand Prix, the rain-affected race at the Nürburgring. But Australia 2006, he's actually finished 8th, and thereby scoring a World Championship point. They got him on a technicality afterwards, and they disqualified him from the race because at the end of the race, Jenson Button blew up right before the line, and he stopped short of the line so that Honda would have a free engine change. Scott Speed overtook, I believe it was David Coulthard, heading to the line, technically speaking under yellow flags. But how could he have seen the yellow flags when there was a burning Honda on the side of the road right next to where the flag stand was? I don't know. Remember, these are the days before they had the GPS units in the cars with the displays flashing on the steering wheel telling them where the yellow flag was. That was BS. He actually has 1 championship point to his credit, Mr. Scott Speed. Roberto Meri, yes. What do we have here? Here he is. Yeah. 14 entries, 13 starts, all in 2015, no points. He was so forgetful that I forgot him. What's he done in his career? Formula Renault, Formula 3, more Formula Renault, more Formula 3, GT. He's been at it for a while, actually. Won the Formula 3 Euro Series in 2011. Huh. He actually, wow. He was in Formula 1. And then, oh yes, that's right. He's the guy that caused that huge crash in Austria a few years ago in Formula 2. Or was it Formula Renault 3.5? Whatever it was. He caused the biggest accident I've seen in quite some time. The race winner had slowed down. Or was he the race winner? I don't know. I don't think he was. He couldn't have been. No, the race winner had slowed down at the end of the race on the start-finish straight. Meri comes along at full speed and plows into the back of him, goes airborne, and causes this enormous crash after the race is over. And notice he's no longer racing in Formula 2. Jaime Alguersuari, that's another guy who received some unwanted attention in the posterior regions by the Red Bull Young Driver program. Again, he's another guy who deserved a better chance and didn't get it because of Helmut Marko. Now I think he's actually a DJ on Spanish radio. Gutierrez, I liked him. I did honestly like him. Again, he was a victim of circumstances, as many Formula One drivers tend to be. He, I guess his most memorable moment was the accident he had with Fernando Alonso in Australia. But, to his credit, the first thing he did after making sure that he was okay was run over to Fernando and make sure that Fernando was okay. So, good guy, Esteban. Not such a great performer, but okay, I'll remember him fondly. He had a cup of coffee in IndyCar over here. He's I don't know where he is now. That's actually something decent that we can consult the interwebs with. There he is. He scored 6 points, set a fastest lap. 2 races with Dale Coyne Racing in IndyCar. Formula E, 2016, 2017. What's he doing now? He was a test driver for Mercedes of all teams in 2018. I don't know what he's doing now. Doesn't say. Perhaps he's retired from racing entirely, or perhaps he'll be. Well, this claims that he is currently a test driver at Mercedes. I don't know how current that is. When was this last edited? Last edited 16 May 2019. So I guess he is still a Mercedes test driver. Not bad. Desert Racer 75. Annie, predictions for Bump Day and the Fast 9 shootout tomorrow. Well, Fernando Alonso is not going to make the race. I think that's probably the biggest bombshell. Aside from that, it's going to be the usual suspects on pole. It's going to be Will Power or Scott Dixon or one of the other Penske guys. Pagenaud could be a good bet for pole. It's, again, IndyCar, just like F1, they have their hierarchy. You always have your Penske's and Ganassis on top. But the difference is, truly, when you are looking at one of these races, any car taking the start can win. And we've already seen that this season with Takuma Sato winning at Barber. He's always a little bit of a long shot choice. Takuma Sato, remember him from F1 from now many years ago. He's kind of getting old in terms of ages of racing drivers, but he's still damn quick. Remember, he's an Indy 500 winner as well, 2017. And that's the cool thing about IndyCar. Anybody can win. It's realistic to say that anybody can win, unless you're McLaren at Indianapolis. Christian Klien, yes, I do remember him. 2005, 2006. There he is. Is he still in endurance racing? Doesn't appear to be. Oh, yes, he is. Blancpain GT, Assetto Corsa Competizione. He's going to be in that game. Cool. Yep, remember him. Oh, yeah, that's right. He actually started with Jaguar in 2004. There you go. Replacing Justin Wilson, of all people. Here's how I remember him. 2005. Red Bull RB1, which was basically the Jaguar R5, which was basically the Toro Rosso STR1. There he is. This would be one of the few times that he was actually on track at Indianapolis in 2005. But cool. Yeah, he had a spell with Honda as their test driver. Here is the most farcical Formula One car in recent memory. Yes. It's ugly, isn't it? And it was slow. I could have forgiven them for the absolute hypocrisy of a livery here if they were actually competitive, but they were consistently the worst. Honda RA107. Everybody was making fun of them for this Earth Dreams livery, and they continued it in 2008, but toned down a lot. And, yeah, they were absolute crap. Christian Albers, the Dutchman, driving for Minardi and later Midland and Spiker. I think he was gone by the end of 2007. Yep, 2008 he was back in DTM. There he is. He scored 4 points. Not bad. 2007 British Grand Prix was his last F1 start. Cool. And not for nothing, but I know this is the Minardi, but this was a cool car, nonetheless. I mean, I loved the livery that they had. And yeah, it was an absolute handful. It was slow. It was unreliable, all of the above. But look at that. That's cool. We need this in Assetto Corsa. Honestly, if anybody from VRC, Cosdar, is still watching, make this. This is a cool car. You've already made 2 2005 cars. Add one of the back markers, too. Add a Minardi, or add the Jordan EJ15. That was also a really cool looking car. 2005 and 2006 were really cool in that we had good looking cars all through the field. I can't really think of too many other seasons where every car looked good. 2005 and 2006 were brilliant seasons in terms of the aesthetics of the car. I mean, let's just do this. What was that called? Super Aguri SAO5. That was their first car. Here it was. This was the first car that Super Aguri fielded in 2006. It was basically the Arrows A23 that had been facelifted a little bit to comply with the 06 rules. The 06 rules weren't all that different from the 2002 rules, barring the engine. So that was cool. Front suspension mounts. Oh, look at that. I never knew that. Have a look here at the top of the monocoque here, where the nose is. You can see where they've blanked off the holes for the front suspension that would have been used on the Arrows A23. Remember, it was the same chassis. But obviously Super Aguri went with their own suspension design and they retrofitted it into the SAO5. That's cool. I never knew that little tidbit. Learning things from 12, 13 years ago. Cool. And then, of course, the SAO6. This was their proper car. Still kind of based on the Arrows A23, but there it is. This was, I believe, yep, this is at Interlagos. Takuma Sato in that car. And again, this is the back marker car of 2006, and it looks really cool. Just honest, objectively, I think you've got to say that the proportions of this look are good. In terms of the sizes and shapes and locations of all the major wing elements and things. I like that. And this was the worst car of 2006. Now, let's look at the car that won the World Championship in 2006, the Renault R26. Here that is. So you just saw the worst car, and now we're going to take a look at the best car, and there it is. And again, that looks good to me. That just looks really good to me. And again, it's got to do with the way the rules were, with the proportions of everything in terms of the wings, and I even like the grooved tires. Yeah, they hurt performance, but there was a reason behind it at very least, so you could sort of forgive them. It just looked good. Every single car from 2006 looked good. Here's the Ferrari 248, not the @48. There we go. Look at that. That is cool. Obviously, this is the car running much later. It's running on, looks like Pirelli slick tires here. But this is the 248. I'm not sure if Felipe Massa is actually driving it here, but it's a Massa helmet. But, yeah, that looks really good. And this is the car as it would have appeared at the end of the season. That just looks really, really, really good. You can see what Ferrari did this year with the front wing, with the bridge element there that we started to see at the end of 05 into the beginning of 06. That just looks real good. I like that immensely. The Sauber, the last proper Sauber that we had for a while was actually in 2005. It was the C24. There it is. This is that. This is the C24 from 2005. Jacques Villeneuve in the car here. That is beautiful. I love that. Now, you can say that it's the Ferrari F2003 with some bits and bobs on it to technically make it different, and yeah, it is. But I like that. I really loved what they did in the engine cover area. You saw how the shark fins evolved in 2008, really. Renault stuck a fin on the back of their car, and then everybody else copied it. You can see what's going on here in 2005, extending that line going down the back of the engine cover. That is beautiful. I really do like that. And yeah, that's a good point about the Red Bull sponsorship on the Sauber. You can see the big areas of uninterrupted blue, particularly on the engine cover. That would have been Red Bull branding, I am sure. But there it is. That's a cool looking car from '05. The BMW F106 is what would have been the Sauber in 2006. Here it is. Do we have a similar angle on it? Not really. There it is. Nick Heidfeld in there. Not bad. Again, this was a midfield car. Still looks good. Still looks real good. Every single car in 2006 looked good. Midland M16 it was called. There it is. This is Montero in there. That looks good. Nice. Yeah, going down memory lane with it. I liked the way this car sounded on the onboards. It had a Toyota engine, but the upshifts on this car sounded really cool. I liked it. There's not much footage of this one running, but it was cool. What else do we have? One more from that season. They all looked good. They really did. This one was good. RA 106 from Honda. There it is. Look at that. Yes. And it was a race winner as well. And again, this was my era. I loved the way the cars were in this time. I was really getting into being an F1 fan at this point, and it was again, they all looked so good. This car as well from the onboard sounded really nice. Remember, there was this in the TV coverage of the Istanbul race that year. They had this long spell of staying on board with Rubens Barrichello driving this car, and it was brilliant. Loved it. Yeah, McLaren. Yeah, this is what McLaren were running in those days. This is Pedro de la Rosa in the car. This looks like it might have been post-season because I don't quite remember that nose on this car for most of the year. But that's De La Rosa in there. And, yeah, that chrome livery with the Dayglow red for the Emirates sponsorship, that was different. Raikkonen in the same car. There we go. This is during an actual Grand Prix meeting. That shot with De La Rosa was postseason, I'm sure. But there it is. They all looked good. Mr. Ayrton, yes. F1 2019, the Codemasters game, they're going to have at least a version of it with Senna and Prost in it. The Ferrari 641 and the McLaren MP45 are going to be in there with the likenesses of Senna and Prost as well. I don't know if that'll be in the base version of the game or if it'll be DLC or a different version of the actual disc that you'll have to get if you're on console, but it's going to be in there. Single Racer! Hello, Single Racer, or should I say, good eye, Single Racer, how are ya? Ferrari Man 601, I can't stay as I finally have time to record my next video, but in it I briefly say thank you for your support. I just wanted to say it here personally also, as I hit the 1,000 subscribers mark. Well, Single Racer, honestly, you've done all of that all by yourself. I love what you do, and I know that sometimes it's a little bit troublesome for you to find time to make content, but the content you do make is really awesome, and I'm glad to have you here, and moreover, I'm glad to have you on YouTube doing the great stuff that you do for our sim racing hobby. So thank you very much. Scuderia Casey Dixon, you hear that F1 2019 will also have the Ferrari F10 and McLaren MP425. I heard that as well, and I think it's true. I'm pretty sure I saw renders of those cars in the game. Um, but this is an interesting question, actually, because obviously Codemasters did F1 2010, which featured those cars, among others. And I've always wondered when Codemasters would actually go back and use some of those resources again, update those models, and bring them into a game. Obviously, they've already done it with the Red Bull RB6, which is good to have, and is actually a really cool car to drive in F1 2017 and 2018. Is in both. So yeah, it's good that they're bringing in some of the cars from their older games now, because obviously they've gotten smarter about this, and they can obviously do a better job now. But I'm glad that they've decided to do that. It's good. It's real good. Hopefully we get more. Baritono 1987. In English, what does it mean? Puesta a punto. Um, puesta significa point o post. Es como lugar o posición en cualquier terminología que tenemos. Punto literalmente se traduce como point. También se puede tener el significado de heel, de tacón, en un zapato, por ejemplo, pero depende del contexto, barítono. Scuderia Casey Dixon. I hope it is, yes. Yes, Ayrton, we're hoping the game's going to be lit. You know where I stand on Codemasters. They're not Sims, but they don't build themselves as being Sims. They're trying to cater to a wide audience. And they're trying to cater to a wide audience which is utilizing multiple platforms. So they have to kind of cut down the middle between, are we going to be really exemplary and realistic in terms of our physics, or are we going to cater to different gameplay elements such as the career mode with the storylines and the historic content with trying to feed into the nostalgia parade. And they do a decent job at presenting the product that they want to have. But I mean, they're not at all going to compare to a proper racing sim. They're never going to be an R Factor. They're never going to be an Assetto Corsa. They have their own niche, and they do a good job catering to their audience. But it's not going to be a sim. It will be cool though in terms of all of that legacy content. The BAR, the BAR cars from '99 with the split zipper livery. That was cool. Was that '99 or 2000? I think it was '99. But Honda RA 099. There it is. Yep. This was the car that was supposed to be fielded by, well, the Honda Formula One team. I think they were going to give it to BAR, but it didn't happen. This would have been slow. I could just tell you right off the bat this would have been really slow, because look at how wide it is, particularly in the nose section. The cars had really become very slender and spindly by this point, and they were just going to be behind the curve. It's probably why it never raced. But yeah, there it was. It had the Honda V10 in it, which was a good engine, a little bit unreliable, but very powerful, very peaky. And this was it, the RA 099. Tangentially related to it is this, the Toyota TF101. This was the car that Toyota built in 2001, and they never intended it to race. It was just a test car, and they ran this extensively in 2001, but there it was. TF101 was tested by Alan McNish, I want to say. Yep, and Mika Salo. There it was. And yes, Pizza Face Racer. That was just the car as Honda had prepared it, the RA099. They were obviously going to dress this up with a proper livery with sponsorships and whatever if they ever actually wanted to race it. But this was just as they had prepared the car for testing purposes. Ah, do I remember the failed MP418? The MP418, this is one of my favorite cars in general, Formula One or not. Look at this thing. I love this car so much that I actually have a model of it, and yeah, a couple of years ago I actually did a video about my model of the MP418. It's so cool because it's so weird. I don't think we have too many good pictures of this thing. This is the MP419, which was derived immediately from it. Those are all the pictures we have of it. I did a video of my model of this car where you can actually see it in detail. But they never raced this car because it was intended to race. It was intended to race in 2003, but they never got it running properly because first of all, it failed the crash tests badly. I'm not entirely sure why they failed the crash test, but they failed the crash tests badly. And aside from that, it was unreliable because they couldn't get the thing cool enough. Look at those side pods in there, and I know this is a very small image, but look at what's going on there. Everything is shrink wrapped. This is probably the first shrink wrapped Formula One car that we have gotten because, again, this is '03. We're still talking about V10s here, but everything is really slender. It's starting to be more sculpted, more form-fitted to the components underneath, and they couldn't get enough air in there to cool that big V10. So it was unreliable, and because of that, they didn't have the pace because they couldn't push the car too hard because it would blow up, and it was an endless positive feedback loop going in a bad direction, and that's what it became. But this is an Adrian Newey car. And the things that they learned about the MP418 were things that they applied on one very particular and very special car near and dear to my heart. This one. Boom. Yeah, there it is. Obviously, the family resemblance is there. They had to ditch the really slim side pod concept because they simply couldn't get them to work, but you can see how they're running the extractor chimneys out of there. They had those NACA ducts for the radiator exhausts on the MP418, the MP420. They've sculpted them into chimneys, and it's really, really awesome. Yes, it's what you would have expected from the era, but it's fantastic. Little T-wing on the back of that, believe it or not. In 2005, they were running T-wings, yes. And, yeah. But moreover, just beyond its immediate successors, if you take a look at this, the Red Bull RB5, unfortunately we don't have a rear shot. But there's the shrink wrap. All of that. The exhaust coming out the bottom of the top side there, just alongside the gearbox, blowing the diffuser. That was also something that Adrian Newey was doing on the MP418. So you can look at the MP418 as a failure, or you can look at it as the initial version of the RB5, the RB6, the RB7, the RB8, and the RB9, all of which won world championships or came damn close to it in the case of the RB5. There it is. So, yes, it was disappointing, but it came right in the end, especially for Adrian Newey. Ah, barítono, entiendo ahora. Punta tacón, heel toe, en inglés, en términos de hablar en la manera de cambiar las marchas en la caja de cambios, sí. Heel toe, punto tacón. Took a little while, but we got there in terms of what we're talking about. Cool. He's asking about heel-toe shifting, the heel-toe technique in terms of driving a manual transmission car. The Infinity Red Bulls, I think they were a little bit too purple toward the end in terms of the liveries. I liked what they did on the RB8. This was before Infinity, of course. I liked that particular shade of blue. By the time Infinity got on board, you can see the purple coming in. It looked a little bit gaudy to me. And, of course, later on, we don't want to talk about this utter abomination. Although Daniel Ricciardo won a couple races with it. 2015 is where Sebastian Vettel said he'd had enough. I'm going to become the next Michael Schumacher. No. RB13 is obviously the 2017 car. Here's where they started to go more in the direction of that matte livery. And then, of course, really, last year and this year, they've taken that matte livery to a whole new level. I like it. A lot of people say the matte livery is terrible. I like it a lot. Looks cool. And obviously Ferrari now have gone with that as well. The 2006 Toro Rosso. Yes, Ayrton, you are alluding to a little comment exchange that we had on another video, which was talking about copyright, blatantly ripping off copyrighted content there. But, yeah. STR1. There it is. The last V10. It's got speed in the cockpit here. It is the Jaguar R5. But there it is. And for the record, it is the last V10 Formula One car. Yeah, the 2015, 2016 Toro Rossos, they looked okay. I liked what they did with that deep blue that they're still running now. I like that a lot. I like that better than this scheme, which they kind of carried all the way through to the end of, really the end of 2016. They had this bull motif going on. I like the blue that they have now. Let's see. Red Bull went matte, and they failed to win the championship. Ferrari went matte, and they are utterly failing at trying to win the championship. Is it a coincidence? No. No, it's not a coincidence. However, they have no relation to each other, quite obviously. And I'm being facetious, because I know you're being facetious. But it is what it is. What do we have? Now, just looking through the specs on the STR1. Shame. Great shame. This car still runs, by the way, in Boss GP. I don't know when they do their events or where you can actually see them, but the STR1 still runs today, and it's still got its Cosworth engine. And speaking of which, take a look at the air intake on this. You can see how much smaller it is in relation to the rest of the roll structure here. That is to limit the air intake for the V10. Obviously, the rest of the field were running V8s, which were a little bit less powerful than the V10, so they tried to restrict the performance of the STR1 as much as they could. And they did that in two ways. They limited the air intake, as you can see, and they limited the revs. They limited to 16,500 for most of the season. I believe they were allowed to run up to 16.7 or 16.8 in qualifying. But there you go. This says they were limited to 17,000 at one point. Not so sure about that. I can never recall this engine actually revving out to 17,000 in 2006, but maybe they did. I don't know. What liveries do you think could be cool, but just kind of aren't? To me, the 2017 Sauber livery is just that. What was that car called? Was it the C36? Yes, it was. Uh-huh. Yep, this could have been cool. And honestly, it doesn't look all that bad. It just doesn't quite work either. They needed more sponsors, honestly. All this blank white on the car, yeah. That was a problem, and unfortunately, the Wikipedia article, that's the only one that we have there. But, yeah, it could have been cool. The last Sauber, unfortunately. This thing. Officially called the Sauber C37, but everybody was already calling them Alfa Romeo in this era. They did a crap job with this livery, too. This car needed to be red and black, but they made it red and white with a little smattering of blue down the side. Why? I don't know, but they did that. They haven't done much better this year either. The C38, effectively the same livery. Again, it needs to be, the white needs to be replaced with black, or at very least a dark gray, because you need that, you need the more subtle contrast. That would be better. And obviously this car isn't doing all that great in the hands of Giovinazzi and Raikkonen this year. But I do like what they're doing with the air intake there. Splitting it across multiple levels. And the exposed roll bar. I like that a lot. Sauber, they tend to have unique traits in their design. That nose as well. The front wing, everybody went crazy over the front wing at the start of preseason testing. That also looked really cool. What also looked cooler than this was the test livery that they had at Fiorano for the car shakedown with Raikkonen on board. That looked really good, and unfortunately they didn't use it beyond that. But that should have been on the car permanently. And here's an interesting... This is the rabbit hole that you go down when you start looking at Wikipedia. Predecessor to the Alfa Romeo, don't call it a Sauber, C38. The predecessor is the Sauber C37, which it actually is. But they also list the Alfa Romeo 185T, which is this beast, as the car's immediate predecessor. Now, obviously, this was the last time that Alfa Romeo actually raced in F1 as a manufacturer in 1985. But, yeah, you know, there have been a couple of decades between this. This one, Riccardo Patresi's car, at, I believe, the, Museo Nazionale di Torino. There it is, the National Museum in Torino, Italy. Cool. Yeah, as far as the overall shape, no, it's not all that much different. You have the cockpit where you'd expect the cockpit to be, and the nose is a nose, and you have a front and rear wing, and the engine's in the middle. You know, it's similar enough. You have side pods housing radiators and whatever. By this point, the cars had more or less achieved the form that they still have, in a macrocosmic sense. But obviously, you can also see just how nasty some of it is. Like, look at the shut line there with the engine cover where it links up with the side pod. It doesn't even meet up. Now maybe the curators at the museum haven't dressed it up properly, but still, that's ugly. But you know, it does what it's supposed to do. Ayrton asking an interesting question. If you had a choice between the McLaren MP45, McLaren MP420, and the Williams FW19 to test in real life, which one would you take? All three? Can I pick all three? Because they would all be brilliant. I guess if I really had to, um, dear. I guess you know what? It would have to be the MP420. It would absolutely have to be, because it was the car that won the first Grand Prix I ever really watched from beginning to end and made it a point to get up in the morning and watch it. So it would have to be the MP420. Around this time, Alfa Romeo also tested a V10, believe it or not, the 80s. I don't know which car it actually was. I think it was earlier than this. Yeah, this is getting back into 82. Wouldn't have been the 179. That was running a V12. Or flat 12, actually. Kind of. 60-degree V12. That's a proper V12. Yeah, but at one point in the mid or late 80s, Alfa Romeo was actually testing a V10 in a car. I don't know which one it was, but they were testing it, and there's a video of it, and it's awesome, and you should all find it. If I were building the ultimate F1 car, do I put a V10 or V12 in it? Um, Well, what regulations am I building it to, really? Because if I had to pick, it's going to be to the 2002 to 2005 rules, and they're going to be V10s. I mean, I would love to be able to have a V12 in it, but it's if you wanted to be competitive in that era, V12 wasn't the way to go. You know, yes, I'm pretty sure it actually was a factory Alpha V10 in the late 80s. They never raced it, but they did. They did test it. I don't know when it was, but it was a factory Alpha V10. Recommend. How likely are you to recommend the Microsoft Edge browser, easy for me to say, to a friend or colleague? Well, after you put in that really annoying ping into my video, no, none, zero, no recommendations at all. Motorsport Magazine Archive. This is probably copyrighted. Yeah. Here it is. This video. This one. Loco test run for new Alfa Romeo V10 engine. There it is. I'm not going to show you the video in its entirety. I'm not going to show it to you at all, actually, but I want to put the URL up on the screen. There it is. This is where it is. Published by the Candy Tyrrell channel on January 4th, 2014. This is it. That's a factory Alfa Romeo V10 Formula 1 type engine. And I don't know what car that is. It's another video here. Yeah. I have no idea, but there it is. That's yep, that's clearly an Alfa Romeo branded Formula One car with a V10 in it. Yep, whatever it is. So cool. That confirms my suspicion. It did exist. So very, very cool. What else do we want to be talking about here? Ask me some questions. Anything. I don't care what it is. Motorsport, not motorsport, whatever. Which drivers do you ship as a couple? Not entirely sure what you mean by that. I think Seb and Kimmy have something going on, though. Jeff Gordon and Juan Pablo Montoya with the seat swap in 2003 at Indianapolis. Yes. That was epic. Jeff Gordon did pretty good in that Williams, actually. Worst yet most successful F1 car of all time. Well, what are we defining as worst and what are we defining as success? Because if you want to really talk about the absolute worst Formula One car of all time, it's the Liefeld 190. But at the same time, is it successful because we all remember it? Maybe. The organization that produced it doesn't even remotely exist anymore, but the car does. Still runs from time to time. At least it did run at Goodwood in 2009. I don't know if it's run since. But it's there. Slowest, most unreliable, but got good results. Ugh, dear. Typically, slow and unreliable cars don't get good results. The Ligier, what would it be? Would it be the JS43? That's the 95 car. Nope. JS46. Nope. JS43. Yep, I was right. That is the 96 car. This is the one that won the 1996 Monaco Grand Prix. And of course, you can't really say that this is a good analog for a bad car getting a good result because it was a complete fluke. Only 3 cars finished this race, but it won the Monaco Grand Prix. Bad chassis, good engine, finished 3rd in the championship. My mental repository of cars that finished 3rd in the championship is pretty small. I don't know. What would have been Toyota's best season? Would they have finished third? Or would McLaren always have been right behind Ferrari and Williams would have been up there as well? I don't know. And of course, Toyota never even managed to win a race. 2014 Williams, yeah, what was that? The FW36? Or was it the 37? Nope, this was the 36. This thing. Remember these? These friggin' obscene noses? This is Bottas in, I believe, Singapore. Or maybe Abu Dhabi, probably Singapore. Yeah, that nose right there. Disgusting. Had to have it, though. Desert Racer 75. Do you own or have you ever owned Super Monaco Grand Prix? That game was pretty much my introduction to F1 at an early age. I didn't own it at the time. That game came out, I believe, in 1992, something like that. And I was born in 1992, so I wouldn't have had the game then. I always had older game systems growing up. I had a Sega Genesis, which was contemporary more or less to me, but I also had a Sega Master System, which was a little bit older. That was 1985, 1986, something around there. And I had that. I had World Grand Prix Circuit for that game, and that was cool. But I didn't have Super Monaco Grand Prix. I have it now running as an emulator, but I didn't have it in the day, no. Mark Pierce, hello, welcome. Ayrton, you're asking a question. Would Kimi have stayed at McLaren had he won the championship in 2005? He definitely would have stayed in 2006, which he did anyway. And then beyond that, I'm not sure. Maybe if, again, it's pure speculation. I would say that had he actually won the championship in '05, and McLaren had obviously by that point proven to him that he had, the chance of competing and winning the world championship with that team, he may well have stayed on in '07. And of course, had he stayed on in '07, I don't think there's really any question at all that he would have actually won the world championship that year, because the MP422 was the best car on the grid. It was not a copy of the Ferrari F2007. It was actually built to supersede the F2007 because they had the Ferrari data. And Kimi would have won the championship because the drivers got to keep the points anyway. The problem with the politics, though, would have been, does Montoya stay on board at McLaren through 2006 if the team wins the championship? Maybe, maybe not. Does Montoya get... does he get a little bit even more feisty than he already was, knowing that his teammate won the world championship in the same car, and do they come to loggerheads in '06? Maybe. Does Hamilton come into the team in '07 if Kimi, as world champion, is still there? Does Alonso come into the team as world champion in that case for 2006? Maybe, maybe not. So again, there are many things that could have been affected by that. As far as Kimi staying, I think he was always going to go to Ferrari anyway at some point. He was always on that trajectory. He started his career as a Sauber driver, which was, Sauber was basically Ferrari, just as Alfa Romeo is still basically Ferrari today. So he was always going to be going to Ferrari. I think the real question of McLaren win in '05 is, does Montoya stay and does Hamilton ever come? Yes, Squidward. He definitely would have had a few nice things to say about the 2014 cars. Had Rubens won the championship in 2009, yep, that team was always going to be bought up by Mercedes, no matter what happened, because they were so good at the start of the year that Mercedes, and again, being the engine suppliers there, they had to have a piece of that action. So no matter who won the championship for the driver's side, Braun was always going to be sold to Mercedes because they needed that. And it was interesting actually when the sale happened because obviously it coincided with the announcement of Michael Schumacher driving for them. They had just won the Constructors' Championship, so everybody had these big predictions for Mercedes in 2010. The 2010 car, the W01, ended up being an absolute dog. We know that. And unfortunately, Schumacher's second stint in Formula One didn't turn out so well. But when you have a team that literally comes out of nothing, they're basically a refugee, and they win the championship, they don't have the financial backing to stay afloat by themselves. They're always going to get sold. And that's how we have Mercedes now. It's just interesting that it took them so long to get back into championship form. I suppose it was always going to happen anyway in hindsight because Braun just didn't have the resources to develop the car. And even when Mercedes came on board, just acquiring something like that, you're making personnel decisions. You're deciding where you want to spend your money, how much money you want to spend, things like that. So it was always going to take them a little while to get back on form. What we didn't know at the time was that it would take a new engine specification to really get them into the championship hunt. But again, Braun was always going to be sold. The most disastrous race you can remember from your entire life as a Formula One fan. Ah, honestly, there's nothing that compares to Suzuka 2014 for me. That's my Imola 94, basically, in terms of my time personally watching Formula One. There's nothing worse than that. Let's see. Yona asking a question. You could pick one track from 2002 to put on the current calendar, and you can't say Imola. Which one? The Manicourt. Manicourt is it. Ned Bigby asking, top 5 Formula One drivers. Are we talking current or all time? Top 5 current F1 drivers then. Well, I think you've got to say Lewis Hamilton is the best driver currently in Formula One. He has the best car, yes, but the best drivers tend to get the best cars. He has won the World Championship 5 times. He's going to win a 6th this year. He's it. Following him, probably Kimi. And let's see, who else? Verstappen, probably in 3rd there. Leclerc, probably 4th. Ricciardo, let's see, it's a toss-up between Leclerc and Ricciardo for 4th. And 5th on the grid, here's the thing. The guys in the midfield don't get a chance to shine anymore. I would say Perez, actually, for 5th on the grid. Let's see. Do I think Hamilton will tie Schumacher? No. He's going to retire after he wins his 6th championship. Whether that happens this year or next year, I don't know, but he is not going to be a 7-time world champion. Yeah, and here's the thing about a place like Manicourt. If you want to judge a circuit by the type of racing that it produces, that's one thing. That's one measure of making a judgment. And it's a fair one to make, because ultimately, in order for it to be a race, there has to be a possibility of the participants changing position. Otherwise, it's a parade. So if you want to judge a circuit by overtaking, fine. I think it's a valid course of action. Where I come from, though, I tend to look at not only racetracks, but the entire complexion of a series as well by the other factors that come into play in terms of what it's actually like to watch the car at work around the circuit. And I loved Manicourt for that because you had the high-speed corners, because you had the very fast changes of direction through the infield section, through the chicanes. I liked that. I liked watching the cars operate around a place like Manicourt. I also like the same about Hungary, and people also complain about Hungary about it doesn't promote overtaking, which, okay, it doesn't really. But I always love watching a Formula One car working around a place like Hungary because it just has the sorts of loads, and it gets into different dynamic situations that you don't get in too many other places. And it's just fascinating to watch how the suspension is deflecting and how the tires are deflecting and how the driver is having to correct things. You don't see it so much anymore, particularly from the onboard shots because of where Halo is. So you can't really see the front suspension working anymore, which is a great shame. But when you've got those low-down camera positions, particularly out of, what turn would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Through the complex 6 and 7, the chicane there in Hungary, they usually have this low camera angle looking over the exit curves of the 6-7 chicane, and you can see how the cars are working through there, soaking up the bumps. It looks cool. I like watching that. I like to be able to see the car responding to dynamic loading like that. As far as the Austria 2002, let Michael pass for the championship. That was team orders, and they were perfectly within their rights to do it, especially if Rubens had that in his contract. So as crappy as it was to see, it was perfectly reasonable. This is how we're going to run our team. We want this car ahead of the other one. Do it, or you're fired. Simple. Team tactics. Yes, and in terms of the design of Manicourt, they didn't actually take corners from other circuits. They just named the corners after corners from other circuits, which was kind of dumb, but it was a completely unique design, and it was built specifically for Formula One. Ligier actually turned it into their testing ground, which was cool. You'll still hear Martin Brundle talk about doing hundreds of laps around Manicourt when he was driving for Ligier. Again, I just liked watching the cars work around there. Favorite circuit? If anybody has ever spent 5 minutes on my channel, you'll know that it's Imola. And again, Imola, like a place such as Manicourt, like Hungary, it's really cool to watch a car working around Imola because you've got high-speed corners, you've got low-speed corners, you've got elevation change, you've got big downhill braking zones. It's awesome. And of course, in the same vein, you could say the same thing about Spa. Let's see, we have kind of answered this question already. If you could drive any F1 car in real life, what would it be? If I could only choose one, it would have to be the McLaren MP420. Paul Ricard, it's awful. It's absolutely awful. Um, really hate it. And I don't hate it in terms of what it's like to drive it. I've actually spent a lot of time on it in ACC because I think the GT cars really are at home around that place. What I hate about it is how it looks on television, number one, and number two, how artificial it is. It's a good layout, but the problem is there are 170 something other layouts at Paul Ricard because it's not designed to be a racetrack. It's designed to be a test track. Initially, it was built as a racetrack, and then it had this big facelift when it was purchased by Bernie Ecclestone in the 90s, and they turned it into a testing ground, which is fine. But then don't race there, because there's literally... I mean, I know I make this comment facetiously. plenty of times talking about talking about runoff and things like that. But there are literally dozens of acres of runoff at Paul Ricard everywhere. There isn't a barrier anywhere near the circuit. And that's simply because it has to accommodate so many different layouts. But don't race there then. Let's see, what else have we got? Yep, Yas Marina, Sochi, same deal with all that runoff. Oh dear, this is the one that's going to get me in trouble. If you could date any racer, past or present, who would it be? Well, my options are kind of limited, aren't they? I would say in terms of similarities in age, similarities in, generally speaking, enculturation, Tatiana Calderon. Absolutely. I wouldn't mind to have a few encounters with her, shall we say. Let's see, do we attempt this? We might. Primary sound device, system sounds. I don't know if you're going to be able to hear. Let's see what this does. Alright, changing that volume slider did not change the voice volume, so that means we are go. Let's try, since we've been talking about it, let's run Paul Ricard. Oh, you want to see the AC footage? This is just what I've been working on recently. All this bullshit. Yep. And this is the bumper rotation for the live streams whenever I decide to do them again, for the live commentary. Let's see. Do I watch MotoGP? No, I don't. I've never gotten into motorcycles. Probably because I've never ridden one, and I don't want to ride one because they seem really scary. And because I've never ridden one, I don't understand how they work really. I mean, yes, I know that they're not really all that much different from cars in terms of the mechanics and stuff like that. But I can't identify with them. I've driven cars. I drive cars every day, so I understand how they work. Therefore, I can identify with what they do and how they behave and whatever. But bikes, I just don't get it. Let's do, yeah. Let's see, Ayarton, with these interesting hypothetical questions. I like it. If you were an F1 driver, who'd you have as your teammate, past or present? Honestly, who would I have the most fun with? Probably... Oh dear. Again, I think I would probably get on pretty well with, I would probably get on really well with Gerhard Berger or Kimi Räikkönen. They seem to have personalities that I would mesh with pretty well. Certainly wouldn't be somebody like like Prost or Senna or even Hamilton, because they weren't team players per se. They were first and foremost concerned with their own success, and the moment the team was no longer doing what they wanted, they went off and did something else. But I'd be looking to enjoy the experience. So again, somebody like Kimi or Berger or even John Alesi maybe. We'll see. Barrichello, yeah, he would also be a solid choice. Talk about a team player, there it was. He gave up a couple of world championships, undoubtedly, for Michael Schumacher and Ferrari. And why am I at Zolder? I want to be at Paul Ricard. There we are. Who cares about setup?
Green light. Go, go, go.
Let's see, do I remember my control scheme for this? Let's see, there's the ignition. Right. I have no idea how loud all this is going to be. Let's see what the engine sounds are going to be like. Alright, I think you'll all still be able to hear me over the engine, so that'll be good. Alright, so I think we're set to go. Cool. Yeah, Paul Ricard. I actually like it in a GT car. I don't think it's really optimized for open wheelers, particularly the modern ones. Mostly because they just, they have way too much grip. In the corners here, they all do that multi-apex, constantly changing radius BS that nobody cares about. So open wheelers aren't happy around here. These GT cars are a bit heavier, a little bit slower. You can play with them more. So it generally works. Traction control is dialed up way too high. This gives us... And let's just turn it off. F1 is what we want there, I think. Cool. F1 runs the chicane there over there on the left. Needlessly. Brakes are stone cold. Have to get some heat into them. See, it's corners like these, all coming in through Sector 3, that open wheelers just don't like very much nowadays. It's constantly changing in its radius, and you can see how tight it is at the exit. You just run off the road. These cars, they can do it. You can change direction a little bit more, not faster, but a little bit more easily in these cars because they're easier to control as I spin all over the place. There we go. I haven't played ACC in about 2 months. Right here. Look at that. Look at all of this expanse of empty space all around the road. There's no physical demarcation between the racing surface and what's out of bounds. It's just paved a different color. That's annoying. I don't like that at all. Saved it. Looking at what I'm doing. There we go. Here you actually need to come in wide and then gradually back it down. There you go. Same story through this mess. It's very much a tale of two corners. Now we're starting to get with the program. I hear when the car's really hooked up, this is flat. Not quite there yet. Yes, last year's French Grand Prix, when nobody bothered to take turn 2, that was exactly what I thought would happen. That's exactly what did happen. Because there's no point in following the road, really, other than some mean French guy is going to yell at you. There is no physical restriction keeping you from wandering anywhere between the barriers here, and the barriers are nowhere to be found. And you see along the sides of the track, like here, that apex bollard there, if they weren't there, you would legitimately get lost. You need a landmark to aim for, and they just don't exist in this place.
This is me, Russell West.
Up right on the exit, which we totally didn't. Flip the curve here and take this flat. There we are. Of course, at the end of this long straight, the brakes get stupid cold. of shape in a hurry. Yeah, if you can't tell, I am totally not happy with what this car is doing right now. Having quite a time just keeping it on the road. That corner we just went through, it's unnecessarily tight. You've got all of this empty space around the circuit. Why not use it? And yes, the Gorilla Trophy that they awarded at last year's French Grand Prix, that needs to go away, please and thank you. The most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in a Formula One event, aside from Halo. Stop, stop. Keep stopping. Final corner, what a joke.
Well done, mate. Not so nice.
Got wide there again. Okay, so that was off track, but I did the same thing on the lap before and it was inbounds. It's just arbitrary. That's what's stupid about this place. Race Ready F1, have I ever played Beam NG? As a matter of fact, I have. That's not a clean lap because I exceeded some arbitrary track limits, which is literally distinguished by nothing in particular. wish that we had open wheelers in ACC, because this is absolutely beautiful. Everything that you would expect this car to be doing, it is doing, including handling like an absolute pig. So I really wish that they gave us mod support with this game. They're not going to, but it's good. It's going to be really good when it comes out for good in terms of version 1.0. But, you know, I just want to know who was the person who demanded that we get a super fantastic accurate sim of the Blackbahn GT series. Because I heard a grand chorus of about no people whatsoever asking for such a title, but we got it. Done such a good job with it all around. The physics are great. The car detail is great. I mean, we were spoiled a little bit in 2014 with the Assetto Corsa, but this is next level for sure. All the detail in here, all the gauges work, obviously. You can even see the seat belts and the little cockpit netting in there moving around with the vibrations.
Steps in front.
But I really wish that we had open wheelers in here. What I really, really wish is that Kunos, not Codemasters, had the Formula 1 license. That would be fun times indeed. First shot the braking zone. Just trying to see how late I could leave it. Apparently we got to be earlier than that. Yeah, we have no IndyCar video game. We do have a European truck racing game now, which, for the record, with regard to the European truck racing game, somebody actually threatened to kill me over a comment that I made over that game because I called it Euro trash, which, you know, I don't have anything against Europeans. In fact, I wish I could be a European most of the time. However, truck racing, no. Does it warrant its own video game? An officially licensed title? No, it really doesn't. Not when we have so many other things out there which don't have an officially licensed game, and they, you know, they don't pursue that any further. So I called it Euro trash, and then somebody threatened to kill me. So that was great. He got reported to all sorts of different social media justice platforms, and hopefully he's banned from YouTube forever. Actually getting a bit more compliant as the fuel load burns down. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised by that. Apparently my track competence is 0, according to this. They say drive 4 clean laps. I haven't done one yet. Asking me how old am I? I was born in 1992. That puts me at the ripe old age of 27. I a totally separate other real-world life that has nothing to do with cars or racing or whatever. All that good stuff. This is just me extending my childhood as long as possible. Fuel's left out. 11 laps worth, 34 liters. Yeah, John, take your track limits and stick them someplace. Right next to your sausage curb. Christian Gaitan, the 2019 Toyota Supra. Oh, God. This could be a whole series of F-rants. The Toyota Supra came out in the mid-'80s. Initially a sensible kind of car. I mean, yeah, it was always a sports car. I'm not going to lie about that. But, you know, it was sensible. It had good equipment. It was reliable. They were built like tanks. The really famous Supra is the 96 version. That's the one that got into the Fast and Furious movies and every Need for Speed video game ever put out on console. But honestly, it's not my favorite. I like the 89 through 92, 93. However, the 2019 Toyota Supra, or should I say the 2019 Toyota BMW Z4, whatever. It's a BMW, it's not a Toyota. Secondly, it's not a sports car. What it is, it's a fashion accessory. It's a fashion accessory for fat, middle-aged American men who have absolutely nothing going for them in the personality, intelligence, or family attachments department. So therefore, they have to spend their midlife crisis money on something with a flashy name and absolutely nothing else to show for it. Toyota, really? You're gonna make a Supra and only offer it with no, not a sequential manual, not a dual clutch, a torque converter automatic. There is no manual option. There is no other transmission option for the 2019-2020 Toyota Supra. It's an automatic, the same one that you can find in a godforsaken Camry Toyota. Why have you done this? Give up, you lose, good night. There we go. Yeah, with the new Corvette, they better damn well offer it with a manual. Doesn't have to be the base equipment by any means, but offer it. At very least, you have to offer it. The reason why car companies are absolutely killing driving is because of Americans. 100% willing to take the blame on that. Americans are some of the laziest people you will ever meet. If you are an American, you know exactly what I mean. We're lazy. We're not just uneducated, we're maleducated. We don't want to take the initiative to do anything for ourselves anymore, none the least when it comes to driving. We can't be bothered to learn how to handle a third pedal. We can barely handle two as it is. So automakers are killing really awesome cars because of Americans. Now for the rest of the world, this really isn't a problem because my European fans, I'm sure you'll attest, it is far more common still in most trim levels of everyday cars to find a stick in there because it's cheaper to produce, they're cheaper to purchase per result, and you know, it actually saves you fuel in a lot of cases as well. But Americans, no, we need our comfort, we need our convenience. We can't be bothered with driving when we're actually in a car. No, we have to be answering our smartphones and eating McDonald's. So that is why the Toyota Supra is what it now is. That's also why Formula One will never conquer America. Not only because it's absolutely backward nowadays, but because Formula One drivers, they have names with weird letters in them. I can't possibly learn how to pronounce that. I think we finally found pace around here, by the way. Scuderia Casey Dixon, it gets worse. I am starting to find more and more, as you know, I've been driving for 10, 11 years myself. I am finding now that younger people who are just now starting to drive, they don't know how to drive cars that don't have blind spot monitors on them. Like, they don't know how to use mirrors. Seriously. I see it all the time driving on highways, you know, at consistently high speeds, just maintaining your lane. I see young people all the time. They're drifting in and out of lanes. They're not looking before they do a lane change because they're waiting for the car to tell them it's not safe. It's terrifying. That was very sideways. This sliding around, I would have expected the tires to be absolute garbage by now, but they're still good. Pregunta interesante de Barítono. En comparación los españoles con los italianos, en mi opinión, no hay muchas diferencias entre España o Italia en términos grandes de la cultura. Para mí la lengua española y la lengua italiana son muchísimas semejanzas entre los dos idiomas. Por supuesto, los españoles se pueden entender los italianos casi perfectamente. Yo puedo entender los italianos y el italiano en general casi perfectamente. Por supuesto, puedo leer el italiano sin problemas. Y en general, los idiomas latinos son un continuo de dialecto, no son idiomas distintos en mi opinión. El italiano, el español, el portugués, muchas semejanzas. Spanish racing driver Maria de Villota, yes, of course I have heard of her. Unfortunately, she is no longer with us. She was injured in a testing accident in 2012, testing for Marussia. Unfortunately, she was unfamiliar with the car, thought she had put it into neutral, she hadn't done, and trundled its way, it idled in first gear into the back of a truck, which had a loading ramp which had been extended. She ran into the back of it, it hit her in the face. She lost her right eye, I believe it was, and suffered tremendous skull fractures in the incident. She made a partial recovery, but about a year and a half later died as a result of a blood clot in her brain, undoubtedly related to the injuries she suffered in the accident. I hit the ball hard. Is that going to be a penalty? No. Okay. I guess I'm getting decent marks from the system. All right, this car really comes alive when the tires start to wear out. It's good. Said that was perfect. That was not perfect. That was very good. The car was sideways most of the time. There we go. Friggin' rating systems are there? That was consistency. First was track confidence, then it was consistency, now it's car control. What laps do they want me to do around this place? It's just a free practice session. It's a private test. I know Sim Racing 604 did a wonderful video talking about the rating system in Assetto Corsa Competizione, and it's good. I think it's a reasonable tool to help you learn circuits and to get comfortable with cars. But if you're really expected to go through this whole song and dance for every car and every circuit, I think it's a little excessive. More laps? Nope, not doing that. Totally not doing that. I can't do 4 more laps anyway because I'm going to run out of gas. Yep. How do you like this for aggression, huh? Very aggressive. Oh, I would say that was very aggressive, wouldn't you? How's this for some more very aggressive? Yep. Yep. How you like that? Drift it. Uh-huh. Yep. I turned the wiper on by accident. There we go. I didn't lose control. I didn't spin. Don't say that. Alright, can I turn the wiper off? I can control the wiper. Can I turn it off? Yes, finally. Apparently I was turning the launch control on, I guess. I don't know. Why would you even be able to turn the launch control on if you're not stopped? I'm curious now what that button actually does. What does that launch control button actually do? Okay. In theory, I should now just be able to gun it and drop the clutch. Can I? Oh, look at that, I can. How about that? That was cool. Can I do that without the launch control engaged? It stalls. Interesting. So, launch control, clutch in, first gear, floor it, and then it takes off. Cool. Launch control off, clutch in, first gear, gun it. It works, but not as fluidly. Okay. That's interesting. Little thing to learn, I guess. Paige Carum. He is no longer in IndyCar. Tony Renna, he died in a test accident at Indianapolis. I think it was 96 or 97, something like that. It was an absolutely terrifying accident. There's no known footage of it, at least none that's been released to the public, but the car got airborne, went into the catch fence, the car disintegrated inside the catch fence, as did Tony Renna. Full opposite lock there. We kept it together. Traction control helped out for sure. And that is the clumsiest pit entry I have ever seen in my life. Pit stop. I'm lost, everybody. This is it, down here. Yep. There it be. Too far ahead of the pit. Yeah. Ugh, almost said something very rude. There we go.
Come on, let's go.
Cool. It was 2003 when Tony Renna died? Huh. I thought it was a bit earlier than that. We did 16 laps around this place? Holy... God. Jeez. You know, ACC does not look bad. Not at all. ACC does not look bad at all. Again, the visuals are fantastic. Imagine if the Codemasters games looked like this. I know they're all talking about their new graphics and trying to make everything look realistic, and you know, you're going to see the shiny tires. How about just fixing the lighting system? Because this is beautiful. And it's not so easy to see it from these shots and with the lighting as well, but the exhaust pipes on most of the cars here in ACC, they actually start to glow when you're running at high revs for a little while. So that's a nice detail as well. I like that a lot. As far as Justin Wilson, that was an accident that will never ever happen again. Even if you tried, you couldn't make that happen again. It was just so perfectly wrong. You could never replicate it. There's nothing you could have done to predict it, avoid it, whatever. It was just what it was. Dan Weldon, again, I don't think, well, we had cars get up into catch fencing before, and we all knew that it was going to be a possibility. Really, what caused Dan Weldon's accident was you had way too many cars on that track. You had 33 cars on a 1.5-mile oval that was really not even designed for IndyCar. It was designed for NASCAR. Very different kind of car. Getting that car up into the air would have been much more difficult. Not that it can't happen, and it has happened, but IndyCar was never really even supposed to be at Las Vegas. They were there. They had far too many cars participating, and the inevitable happened. Worst crash in motorsport history, but no Le Mans 55. I, I don't know. I mean, I think when you look at influential accidents, Imola 94 is big because we had so many good things come out of Imola 94. All of the innovation with the barriers, with designing run-out zones that would actually stop cars. Um, shielding barriers with the belted tire blankets, and then later on nowadays with the water-filled Tech Pro barriers, they're fantastic. Cockpit safety with the head restraints, the Hans system, the cockpit surrounds with the crushable foam in there. All of that came out of Imola 94. So there were two fatalities in that weekend. So if obviously something like Le Mans 55 far exceeds that in number. But in terms of the influence, the positive influence that something like an Imola 94 happened was, I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like that again, which is good on the one hand, but at the same time, when you need innovation, you don't get it until it's already too late for some. So take that for what you will. Yeah, unfortunately, Mr. Dixon, I've seen a few. I saw Dale Earnhardt in 2001. Later on was I saw Felipe Massa's accident in '09. I was watching the qualifying session. I didn't see Henry Surtees happen live because they didn't cover Formula 2 in the United States in those days. I knew about it immediately when it happened, though, and then followed the coverage. Beyond that, I saw Dan Weldon, Jules Bianchi, and Justin Wilson. I've seen a few, unfortunately. Yep, I had been interested in cars for a long time already. By that point, I started to play with cars in terms of working on them when I was 5 years old. So that puts us in 1995, 1996. So I remember all that, and it was sort of tangentially interested in racing by that point. So I kept up with NASCAR and kart, and yeah, I saw Dale Earnhardt. So that was interesting to see as a young kid. Did I watch the NASCAR All Star race? No, I did not, Mr. Lockshine. I did not. Yes, I do remember the Star Wars livery that Red Bull ran. I also remember David Coulthard wearing the Superman cape on the podium in 2006, I think that was. Christian Gaitan, are the environmental police killing motorsport in general? Yes. And I'll add to that pretty much every other institution currently being killed by the environmental police. It's a fad. It's a bit of popular culture that is going to fade into oblivion before too much longer. I'm assured of that. For the moment, though, they're just a very vocal minority. They are in some positions of power. Unfortunately, some heads of state have even bought into the nonsense. But it will pass, and people will resume business as normal sooner or later. Spy 98. I wasn't watching Formula One at that time, but I've since gone back and I've watched a lot of old races, and that's one of them. And yeah, that's I imagine that was absolutely earth-shattering at the time. Of course, the start crash at, at that race as well. That was also pretty ridiculous. It's amazing nobody was seriously hurt in that. We had wheels flying everywhere. And also, when Schumacher ran into the back of Coulthard later on in the race, Schumacher's wheel went flying too. I think it went into the crowd. I don't know where it actually ended up. Favorite F1 season? I think it's honestly, I think it was 2006. Everything just came together so nicely that year. The cars all looked great. You had the intrigue of the new engines and how they were developing them. It was Schumacher's last season up to that point. You had a great rivalry between he and Fernando Alonso, and it went up to the final round and even the last race with Schumacher. He had a problem in qualifying, started 10th, fought up through the field. They actually thought they could win the race from 10th. Then he had a close moment with Fisichella, got a puncture, fell back down the field, recovered to 4th. He didn't win the championship, but it was a great ride all the way. And at the time, he was retiring. That was supposed to be his last race, and it was a fitting send off for him. Yes, of course, the IndyCar, NASCAR crowd comparing it with Formula One and everything else, saying, "Oh, it's just left turns, it's just running in circles." Um, yeah, to an extent it is, but it's a bit more complicated than that. As you can see with the tribulations that Fernando is having at Indianapolis, there's a little bit more going on than just turning left. NASCAR at Coda, I don't think it would be interesting at all, simply because those cars can't turn. They really can't. They run road courses, and they can run road courses, and they do a reasonable job of it, but they're just so slow that the lap times at Coda would be 2.5 minutes, something like that. It would be a painfully slow pace, especially because the kinds of corners that Coda has, they're all variable radius nonsense, and there's elevation change and everything else. Those cars would be a right handful around there, and they could do it, but I don't think it would be really entertaining. And yes, Watkins Glen, They always put on a good show there, no matter what's running, whether it's IndyCar when they used to run there, or NASCAR when they go there. It's a great time at Watkins Glen. And someday I have to get up there for one of the races. And the thing with COTA is, yes, it was built for Formula One, but I don't think it does a particularly good job with Formula One races. Apart from last year's, the U.S. Grand Prix at COTA tends to be a pretty dull affair. Last year it was just interesting because it was Kimi winning, and there was actually a fight going on for the win, which rarely happens anymore. But again, just like I was saying about Paul Ricard earlier, with those variable radius corners, they constantly get tighter throughout. You can't get the car happy. You're either good on the entrance or good on the exit, but you're never good through the whole corner, and it kind of spoils all the action for me. Coda's the same deal, particularly Sector 1. I really do not like Sector 1 at Coda. Everyone says it's just like Silverstone. No, it's not. It's nothing like Silverstone. Silverstone doesn't have elevation change like that. Best track for racing. Ah, dear. The Here's the thing: F1 doesn't put on decent racing anymore, so it's kind of hard to say if there's any one track that's better than another in that regard. Tracks that certainly are not good for it, and I'm not even sure that this is a problem with the circuit itself, but more with the information that exists about it. Catalunya never puts on a good race, but the teams test there, and nowadays it's the only place where the teams can test the cars before the start of the season, so they've just got too much information about the place, really. Aside from that, Baku, the circuit does not yield good racing. People making mistakes at that circuit yields good racing, but the circuit itself isn't really conducive for it. Monaco, same deal. You just can't pass. The cars are too big. And beyond that, Singapore is never interesting to me. China is never interesting to me. Basically, I like Melbourne. I really do. Silverstone is kind of good. Canada puts on a good show as well because it is not a typical circuit. It's more like a street circuit than anything else. Again, in Canada, you don't have high-speed corners, so you don't have to run a lot of downforce, which means the cars are skating around a little bit, and because they're not displacing so much air, running less wing, they can follow closely. So there you go. I do have to say, though, we are coming up to midnight here on the east coast of the United States, and, well, we've been at this for 3.5 hours now. So, at this point, I think it is due time to bid ye farewell. However, I do, of course, thank you all very much for sticking up with me, having some great banter here, great questions asked by everybody, and good points raised by all. Until the next time, though, I do thank you all very much for watching. Ferrari Man 601, saying thanks, and of course, we will see you soon.